Welcome back to Let's Make a Game, a channel about making computer role-playing games using the free program Twine and the Sugarcube format for Twine. In this video, I would like to continue my series on simulating the use of cards in Twine. As you can see, I have a small program set up here which gives me 5 randomly chosen cards from a normal playing card deck. And you notice that, well, maybe you haven't noticed, but there are no duplicates. Every card behaves as a card. So I have the Queen of Spades and I have the Queen of Diamonds, but I will never have the Queen of Spades and another Queen of Spades. And I can draw a new hand as often as I want by restarting the program, and it will always behave consistently. So let's have a look at the code that allows that to happen. So it's a brand new program. We have 5 pages. Let's begin with the one where we set up the variables and name what variables we're going to need and what they do, which, as always, I have called initialize. Alright, so we need to keep track of the state of individual cards. We also need to keep track of how many cards are in a given situation. So, for example, if there are no cards in the draw deck, we need to know that, because then we would need to take presumably in most games, you would take the discard pile and that becomes the new draw deck. We may need to know how many cards are currently in hand, because particular games may have you draw up to a certain number or discard down to a certain number. That's more sort of perhaps modern, like collectible card game type games than traditional playing card type games. But either way, so for this, currently the system is in a quite simple state. We have 3 variables, $C0, $C1 and $C2. C0 is the number of cards currently in the draw deck. C1 is the number of cards currently in the player's hand. C2 is the number of cards currently in the discard pile. As we simulate more elaborate possibilities, there would need to be more variables. For example, we only have one hand, and if we were playing with 4 players, of course, there would be 4 different possibilities in terms of being in a player's hand. In some games, like in Patience or Klondike, sometimes you put a card on top of another card, and so we would need to keep track of cards in play and have a more detailed setup in terms of that. But at the moment, we only need these 3. Now, we could have done this with an array. Instead of having $C0, $C1 and $C2, we could have had $C, and then, for example, $C square bracket 1, n square bracket would be the number in the hand. And as it simulates more complex systems, that might turn out to be better, but at the moment there wasn't any need to do that, so we're doing it as separate variables, but we might do it as an array in future videos. So generally we're going to be, when we choose a random card, we being the program just picks a random number, and it might say, all right, I want to look at card 17. But there are situations in which we need to know more than just this is card number 17. And for sort of regular playing cards, we would need to know the number of the card. Is it an ace? The value of, I wouldn't say the number because they're not all numbers, but the face value of the card. Is it a 7, or is it a queen, or is it a king, or is it an ace? And for that we have $P, which is a numeric value. Because normal cards use jacks, queens and kings, we just give those a number. We say jacks are 11, queens are 12, kings are 13, If it's a numbered card, we just use the number. So 7, the 7 of diamonds would, $P would have a value of 7. And because we're using jokers, we have to have a number that indicates a joker, and we've just decided to use 0 because the numbering of normal playing cards, American style playing cards, starts from 1. Then we have $S, which is the suit of a given card. In this case, jokers are considered to have a suit of -1 because we have this array, $SN, which has the names of the different suits. And in this case, I started from 0. Normally I start from 1. Normally I'd have null and then spades, hearts, diamonds, clubs. But there are certain sums that need to be done, and they're easier if I start from 0. So because I started from 0, because 0 means spades for the suit number, we say that jokers have a suit of -1. And then we also need the file name, because we will be showing pictures of the different cards, of course, and we need to know which file to use. So that gives us $F, $P, and $S, and they are all used, or they are all generated in the page card details, which is this one here, which we'll be getting to in a while. So we have those three. We have, as I said, the array SN, which is the names of the suits. If you use the same set of artwork that I use, which I just found on Open Game Art, and you'll find a link to that artwork in the zip file that you can download from itch.io, as well as the code and all the artwork. It also has a little file that's that says credits, and it says where you can find the artwork. Be aware that there's the person who made the art, I assume by mistake, when they made the file names, they called spades spades with an S at the end, hearts hearts with an S at the end, clubs clubs with an S at the end, but they called diamonds diamond. I don't know if that's a practice that I haven't encountered before. I've always called them spades, hearts, diamonds, and clubs, like all plural. So I don't know whether there's another practice where you just call them diamond singular. I suspect they just made a mistake. But either way, be aware of that. I had to go through and rename all the diamonds files. Okay, so we've dealt with that one. We've dealt with all these. We have $I, which is the initial hand size, which I've arbitrarily set to 5. We have N, which is the number of cards in the deck. This particular set of artwork came with 2 jokers, and so we're playing with a 54 card deck, which is the normal cards, and then plus the 2 jokers. Obviously, you could very easily change this code to not have jokers by making that 52, or only have 1 by making it 53. Then we have W, which is possibly the most important array, and H. H is the cards in the player's hand. So $I is the initial hand size, but we don't use $I except for when we're dealing out the cards. We actually use $H.length, which is a special thing you can do with any either string variable or an array. And in the case of a string, it will give you how many characters are in the string. A string meaning a series of text. So a variable that is a string will be something like that, just any text. How many characters? But if you take the name of an array variable and put .length, it will give you the number of well, it'll give you the number, assuming that that everything's filled up to the highest slot that is filled, if that makes sense. So that's an easy way to keep track of how many cards are in the player's hand rather than having a separate variable. We just use h.length. And to make that work neatly, we start from h0. Again, normally I start from slot number 1 and I don't do anything with slot 0, or I have some sort of total in slot 0 or some sort of other variable that's associated with the array in slot 0. But in this case, we're just filling in slot 0 with the first value of the card because it makes this dot length calculation easier. And then the W array is the all of the individual cards where they currently are. So at the start, when you just do set W equals and then the pair of square brackets like that, everything is set up with a value of undefined, which is different to 0. And it's important to remember that it's different to 0 because in other languages, often they set up everything as starting at 0. And if you assume that it is 0, sometimes you can have calculations that won't give you the result you want. So 0 or undefined, it means the card's in the draw deck. So at the start, everything's in the draw deck. Because you'd imagine if you were playing a real game, you'd have a pack of cards, you'd shuffle it, and then you'd deal from the draw deck to individual people's hands. Interestingly, we don't have to shuffle the cards. There's no page where I'm going to shuffle the cards. We don't need to do that. They're sort of automatically shuffled. And the reason they're automatically shuffled is because when we pick a card, we're going to pick it randomly from those cards that are in the draw deck. So there is no shuffling. There is no sort of code equivalent of shuffling. They're sort of almost shuffled as you go in a way that doesn't match with how you'd really do it. So 0 undefined means they're in the draw deck. 1 means they're in hand, and at the moment we only have one hand, so we can just have a single number that represents that. And then 2 means in the discard pile. And then we have just a note that Z and Y are temporary variables. And then we set up the values of C0, C1 and C2. These ones here. We can't do it here when we declare them because it depends upon $N and $I. $N being the number of cards in the deck and $I being the initial hand size. So C0, which is the number of cards in the draw deck, is always going to start as the total number of cards you have minus how many cards are in the hand. C1, which is the number of cards in hand, is going to be equal to $I, the initial hand size. And C2 is going to be equal to 0 because we start with everything in the draw deck. We move some of those cards to the hand, but we haven't done anything to discard a card yet, so there won't be any discard pile yet. So having set that up, we then go to the page Deal Hand. And Deal Hand is quite straightforward. As you can see, it's only sort of a few lines of code. We have a for loop, which goes from 1 to I, which is the hand size. And that for loop has only one command, which is include draw card. And then when we finish the for loop, we're going to go to display hand. So this very simply just says draw a number of cards equal to $I, which in this case is going to be 5, and then display the hand that you've got. So most of the fiddly bits, I guess, are in draw card. But even then, that's quite simple too. So what we do in draw card is we generate a random number from 1 to $N. So we pick, out of all of the cards that are in the deck, we pick one of them, and then we look at its slot in the W array. And you'll remember that W, or $W, is the current location of the card. So we might say, all right, card 38, where is card 38? Does it have a value of 1 or does it have a value of 2? Meaning, is it in hand or or in the discard pile? Well, at the moment, if it's not in hand or in the discard pile, then that means it's in the draw pile, and that means we can take it into our hand. If it is in hand or in the draw pile, well, that means that's not a result that we can use. So if $W square bracket $Y n square bracket is equal to 1 or it's equal to 2, then that means, as the note says, that card is not in the draw pile, so ignore this result and choose again, which means we include draw card. And because this is draw card, that just means just ignore that result. Go to the top and start again with a different random number. Otherwise, if it's not equal to 1 or 2, it'll be equal to 0 or undefined, and that means we can add it to our hand. So we set its slot in the W array to 1, meaning a card that's in hand, and we set $H square bracket $H dot length, n square bracket, equal to $Y, the value that we randomly chose. And so, as you can see, this dot length thing makes it really easy, provided we start from slot 0. It makes it quite easy to just add the card to the next available slot. So if there's nothing in the array, initially there will be nothing in the array, of course. Sorry, in the array H. And so $H dot length will be 0. And if $H dot length is 0, well, we want to put the next card in $H0. Once we've done that, $H dot length will be 1, and that will mean we want to put the next card in $H square bracket 1 n square bracket. And so doing it this way, even though I don't normally like to start from slot 0, it feels sort of counterintuitive and a bit weird, but it does allow for sort of simpler commands. We can just have this code and it puts the card in the next available slot. And notice that it's not putting 7 of diamonds or the red joker. There's a red joker and a black joker in this set. It's just putting the number. Once we want to, if we want to make have the program do things based on the number of the card or the suit of the card, then we'll need to convert that number to a suit and a numeric value, which we'll be doing later. But it just stores them in H as individual numbers from 1 to 54. So once we've done that, as deal hand says, once you've dealt all the hands, then we go to display hand. We're not altering. You might think that if we're drawing cards and stuff, we should be altering C0 and C1, and C2. Well, we're not altering them because we've set them up to what they'll be at the end of this process on the first page, on initialize. C0 will be $N minus $I, i.e. in this case 54, which is the number of cards in the deck, minus 5, which is the cards that we're putting into hand, equals 49. C1 will be equal to 5 because there'll be 5 cards in hand, and C1 is the number of cards in hand, and C2 is equal to 0. So we sort of cheat a bit. We set them up as being what they're going to be after this process has finished. And the reason we do that at the start rather than at the end, which would sort of technically be more correct, is because then we have the initial values of everything on the one page, and it's easier to look it up. All right, so displaying hand is again fairly simple. We look at C0, which is the draw deck. Is there any cards in the draw deck? If there is, or is C0 equal to 0? If it is, then we have an img command, an image command, which displays an image, which is blank.png. Blank.png is just an image that is the size of a card, the same size as the other cards, but it's completely invisible. It's an image that I made in not Photoshop, but in GIMP. And we do that so that everything's sort of aligned in the same place, so that when we run out of a draw deck, the cards are still sort of roughly where they were in terms of how far across they are. It'd look a bit weird if they suddenly leapt across. So we either show blank or we show this other image called back.png, which is the card back image that we saw. And then we have blank again. Whichever one of those we've shown, we then display blank again because we want to have a little gap between the hand and the between the blue card back and the cards that are in our hand. Then we have a for loop which goes from 0 to h.length, and for each of them we set z equal to $h, $y, i.e. we look in the array that keeps track of what's in the player's hand. Then we include card details, and then we print img. We have an img command printed out, which is going to be something like square bracket img square bracket r slash. So it's very similar to these ones, except that it has whatever's in $f will be in there, and then .png. And of course, what's in f is going to be worked out in this card details page, which we'll look at next. And then at the end of that process of displaying all the cards, this didn't happen when I ran the game because there's no way of discarding cards yet, so we won't have a discard pile. But if C2 is over 0, C2 is the variable that tells you how many cards are in the discard pile. If C2 is over 0, then we sort of do the reverse of what we do up here. We display the blank image, and then we display the back image again to indicate that there are some cards that are discarded face down. Normally, some people discard, it depends on the game as well, I suppose, but in different card games, sometimes when you discard cards, they're face up, but this is just a very basic skeletal structure, and so it's just easier to go to show dollars back. All right, so what we need to look at now is how card details gives us this value of $f, which is the file name. It also generates $s and $p, which is the suit and the numeric value. But at the moment, there's no code that makes use of that yet. All right, so let's have a look at card details. So it's got a little note to myself or to anyone else who might be looking at the code, and it says, given the card number $z, which we've got from the $h array, you'll remember. Given the card number, generate the file name for the card, which is $f, the suit of the card, which is $s, and we note that jokers have a suit of -1, and the number of the card, and that jokers have a number of 0, and a jack is 11, a queen is 12, and a king is 13. The file names are set up like that, so it won't say the jack of diamonds. It'll say diamonds 11, and that's not how I would have done it. I guess it's not intuitive to me, but that's how they came, and so I worked around the file names that I was given because that was easier than renaming every single one of 54 different files. Okay, so we've decided that card number 54 represents one of the jokers and card 53 represents the other joker, and then sort of all the normal cards are in here. So we have an if-else if type of structure. If Z is equal to 54, then the file name is joker red, which is F, $S, which is the suit, is -1, and $P, which is the numeric value, standing for pips. I'm not sure if that's a expression that's in common use. It's used in dice, and I'm not sure if it's used on cards when you say you count the pips on a card, but anyway, that's why I called it $P. We set that to 0. If Z is equal to 53, we have identical code except that the file name is joker black. Otherwise, and this is obviously most of the time this is going to be the case, so this is quite mathematical, and I'll go through an example of how this would work. Let's say we have card number 17. Let's say $Z is equal to 17. So we set $S, which is the suit, and it's going to be 0, 1, 2, or 3. $S is equal to math.floor, bracket, bracket, Z minus 1, end bracket, divided by 13, end bracket. So, the way that it works is we want, there are 13 cards of each suit. So there's ace, then there's 2 through to 10, and then there's a jack, queen, and a king, and that's 13 in total. That means that we want, if Z has a value from 1 to 13, we want S to be equal to 0. If it has a value from 14 to 26, we want S to have a value of 1, and so on, for it to be equal to 2 or 3. So let's look at how this equation works. Math.floor, and you have to use that capital M, or it won't work properly. Math.floor means round down whatever's in the brackets. So if I had math.floor 5, that would just be 5. It only does anything when you're not dealing with a whole number. So if I had 3.9, that would be equal to 3, for example. It just sort of gets rid of anything on the right-hand side of the decimal point. So what we do is, for 17, as an example, we would look at Z minus 1, and we would say, well, that's 16. We would divide that by 13, and we would say, well, that's 1 and a bit, it's 1 point something. And then math.floor of 1 point something is 1. So if the card number was 17, it would give it $S would have a value of, $S would have a value of 1, indicating that it was a heart. And that makes sense because card 13 is the king of spades, and then card 14 is the ace of hearts, and then 17, of course, would be the 4 of hearts. So that would be correct. I'll give you an example of why we do this Z minus 1, not over 13, not Z over 13. So let's say we had 13. Let's say we had card number 13. We want that to have a value of 0. So 13 minus 1 is 12. 12 over 13 is 0 point something. And then math.floor 0 point something is 0. So that gives us the correct answer. And 14, we want to have a value of 1. 14 minus 1 is 13. 13 over 13 is exactly 1. Math.floor 1 is 1. So it will, the break comes at the correct place. Card 13 has a value of 0. Card 14 has a value of 1. And you'll have the same break when we move from hearts to diamonds. So for our card 17, we would have $S would have a value of 1, which is equivalent to hearts. Then we set $P equal to Z minus $S times 13. So in this case, $S is 1, so 1 times 13 is of course 13. So that would be 17 minus 13, which is 4. So $P would be equal to 4. And again, that is correct because remember, we worked out that 13 would be the king of spades, 14 would be the ace of hearts, 15 would be the 2 of hearts, 16 would be the 3 of hearts, 17 would be the 4 of hearts. So it's given S and P the correct numbers. Then we set F equal to $SN bracket $S, n square bracket, plus quote, space quote, so put a space in, and then just put $P. So in this case, it would say, what is $SN1? Well, it's the text hearts. So F would be equal to hearts, then we add a space to that, and then we add this $P. It would be hearts 4. And that is how the person who made the artwork that I'm using numbered or named the files. Instead of saying, I would have said maybe 4 hearts or 4 of hearts, or maybe H4 or 4H, but he decided to have the suit name written out fully, and then a space and a number. But aces don't have an A, they have a 1. And kings, jacks, queens, and kings aren't called jacks, queens, and kings. They have 11, 12, and 13. So we don't need to do anything with that number when we're dealing with a jack, queen, and king. We can just put the 11, 12, or 13 at the end. And so with that value for F, when we go back, to because remember, this card details screen is called from this display hand screen. When we go to card details here and get that, this image command will be something like this. If it was if Z had been 17, it will go square bracket img square bracket art slash hearts4.png, and in that art file we have, among other things, hearts 4. Let me show you the art file very briefly. It will look in there and see that hearts space 4 is indeed a file, and it'll just display that file, or it'll just display whatever it is, spades 8, diamonds 12, which is the queen of diamonds, and so on. And that allows us to draw a hand randomly and ensure that we never get duplicates, because if we choose a number that where it says that card's not in the draw pile, it'll just ignore it and do something else. And of course, and then display it. Obviously, that doesn't have any real use as yet because it's not a full game, but that is the beginning of the system. So I hope you'll join me in future videos. I'd like to look at having a structure that's, a little bit more usable in a game, that's a little bit more complex, that has results. But for now, I hope that was useful or interesting to at least some of you, and I hope you will tune in next time.